Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Happy Canada Day. It is time to have a look at some Canadian vehicles that would be cool to add to the game. Now a lot of people have always asked me, would it be cool to see a Canadian independent tree in War Thunder? Not really. I think in general it would actually be better for them to be a subtech tree or event vehicles or stuff like that, because there is a bunch of Canadian vehicles, especially when it comes to aviation. There's some pretty cool ones there. But the simple fact is, not enough to create its own lineups and not enough to create its own tech tree. So as a subtech tree of a nation, or as a set of event vehicles, I think that would be much better instead of leaving them out. So let's have a look at some Canadian equipment on this Canada Day. So you know how we have the Leopard 2A4M, and now for the German tech tree, imagine if there was a 2A6 version. Well, there is, so we could have a look at the Leopard 2A6M. Now, this one has kind of an interesting history. Basically, Canada has about 20 of them. They leased them from Germany in the 2000s to use in Afghanistan. And then, after basically using them in Afghanistan, they permanently kept them. And then, in order to kind of keep the German military going, a bunch of vehicles are transferred from the Netherlands to the Bundeswehr to keep the numbers proper. Basically, the difference between the standard 2A6 and the 2A6M is that it has more mine protection on it under the chassis, and also some internal improvements when it comes to electronics and also dealing with the crew. So nothing too different compared to the standard 2A6. Still has the longer barrel gun, still has the nice engine and the standard armor package, but overall the difference would be just a little bit more junk on the bottom, which would give it a bit more oomph. Canada also uses a ton of LAVs, including the Bison and also the Coyote. Both of these are LAV-2s, and they are produced and manufactured by General Dynamics Land Systems Canada for the Canadian Armed Forces. Both of these vehicles are 8-wheeled ones, very similar to the standard LAV that you will be useful. They both use the Detroit diesel with the 275 horsepower engine, and the major difference between them is basically their uses. So whereas the Bison is more of a multi-variant vehicle, it's an APC by name, but you can change it into many different stuff, including a mortar holder, which is quite fun. But the Coyote is more the standard reconnaissance version. It's non-amphibious, but it does have access to a 25mm machine gun, or not machine gun, chain gun, sorry, it's the Bushmaster. So it's the M242, and also it has some machine guns on it with some smoke grenades and all the other standard stuff. So what you would get out of this vehicle is a very similar experience to many of the other kind of mid-tier 25mm, 30mm machines with some advanced optics and also advanced mobilities. Things like this would be super fun to see. I think that would be kind of hard to balance, especially with the general ammo on the 25mm, but at least the vehicles would be fun to see with some pretty cool camos. So after looking at some of the older LAVs, we have the more modern LAVs, the LAV-6 as it's known. This is also in service in Canada and also from Canada. Basically, this has been in service since 2016, and it has a lot more modern features than the other variants that have come before it. It still has a lot of stuff which is very similar though. It does use a different engine. It's a Caterpillar diesel engine with 450 horsepower, giving it a little bit more power to weight, but also still carries the M242 Bushmaster, meaning that it can do a decent chunk of damage with a machine gun on top of it too. This vehicle has a bunch of variants with it, which shouldn't really be a surprise since it's one of those which is more designed to do a bunch of different roles. And also at the same time, when you think about stuff like the Striker and also other setups, this LAV-6 as also some similar stuff. So for example, there is a short-range air defense version of this one, the LAV-6 SHORAD, which has access to a SAM launcher on the top of it. So you might also get access to some pretty interesting things in the form of AAs, kind of like the Leopard, but also other vehicles with better guns as it goes along. For planes, there's actually a bunch of really cool jets, which are some of American origin, but some not so much. The first one is the CF-101 Voodoo. The Voodoo is one of those which I feel like many people have asked for a long time, and it doesn't really fit very well in the game, and the CF-101 Voodoo would probably be the worst one that would fit too. Basically, this was a vehicle which was designed for rapid response. It was designed to turn up as an air defense piece to, well, in effect, nuke anything out of the air which decided to come too close. And the CF-101 carried the Genie. Now, if you don't know what the Genie is, or the Air-2A, this is an unguided nuclear rocket. It had a 1.5 kiloton warhead, and the whole point of it was to fire it in that direction, and if anything went through that direction, it would get nuked. And I think that in general would be pretty fun. Now, there were Voodoos, at least some of them I believe later on, which may have had guns, or at least access to them, but the ones that Canada used were more designed around missiles, stuff like the AIM-4 for example, and also the Genies. So as a vehicle, it would work very oddly in the game, since this is a very fast vehicle. It was Mach 1 capable, and also, at the same time, would just have a crazy armament. So for me, I would love to see it, just because it would be so wacky, and no idea how it would be used, but it's just one of those hanger pieces that would be great. Now, the vehicle that the Voodoo replaced was the Canuck, the CF-100. I've wanted this plane in the game for an incredibly long time, and it's a vehicle that looks very similar to the F-89, surprisingly. But this was manufactured by Avro Canada, and they made a ton of them, like nearly 700 of them, to be used by the Royal Canadian Air Force. This vehicle had access to a ton of variants as well, so if you ever wanted to add a bunch in, you could, and it was also used by Belgium, meaning that it could get access to it in the Benelux tech tree, in the French tech tree, which would be kind of cool. Looking at one of the standard variants, it had access to some turbojet engines. This vehicle wasn't exactly crazy fast. It could go maximum just less than 900 kilometers an hour, which isn't great, but the main thing that it had access to is 2 wingtip pods of Mighty Mouses, the good old rockets, the 70mm. So you, if you feel like it, could batter people with them, but also there were variants which could get access to air-to-air missiles, or even access to guns if it was set up in that way. But the main idea of this one was to at least have access to the rockets, very similar to the F-89D. But if you look at something like the Mark III version, for example, that one had 8 50 cal Browning M3 machine guns. So that one could be more standard. But I just like the idea of turning up into a battle, shooting, scooting with a bunch of rockets, and then disappearing. Very similar to the F-89D. This one, as I said, was built a lot. It's one of those which really should be added to the game because of its historical prowess. There aren't many vehicles left in the game that were built at the same numbers as this thing, and hopefully we can see it in many variants soon. And then, of course, you have the CF-18 Hornets. This is a Canadian version of the FA-18. It's not very different from the standard FA-18, and Canada ended up buying a bunch of them in the 80s, and it's still currently in service today. It's seen as a multi-role fighter when it comes to Canada, mainly designed to basically do everything, and they've done a bunch of modernizations on it, so it isn't still just the same fighter from the 80s. It has a bunch of additions, including a bunch of internal stuff, and also the ability to carry more stuff. So more stuff such as better IR missiles, better active radar homing missiles, all of that great stuff that you would expect from a Hornet itself. So the versions that the Canadians got, they got a single C version and a twin C version. It shouldn't really be surprising. And it has the 20mm Vulcan. It has all the bells and whistles when it comes to armaments that you all know and love from the Americans. All of the bombs, all of the missiles, the M9, the M7, the M120. It has the good old JDAMs, I believe, that it can carry as well. A very powerful radar. And also the F404G 400 afterburning engines, meaning that it can nearly go Mach 2. These vehicles are some that many have been looking forward to for the American tech tree, but just like a lot of other American vehicles, they could be spread across the way so more people could enjoy them. There's some Canadian vehicles that could be added for Canada Day, or just in general. I'd love to see them, and hopefully you would too. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shea, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.